Welcome back everybody to the ultimate guide on deploying a Laravel app. So this series is all about learning how to deploy a Laravel application. This is a start to finish approach. We've learned everything from the hosting and what hosts are best. Like we did in the last video, we talked about shared hosting, dedicated servers, virtual private servers, and platforms as a service like Heroku and things like that. So we talked about all the different types of ways that you can serve. You could serve a Laravel application, the pros and cons of each. That was the focus of the first part in our last video that we just had. So now we're on part number 2. In part number 2, we basically have our application. We booted up our server at the end of the last video. We booted up the server. We learned how to SSH into our server, and now we're sitting here with a completely empty server. There's nothing on it, and we need to go ahead and start getting Laravel on there. So this video is focused on installing the technology stack, okay? And this specifically the LEMP stack. This is LEMP, Linux, Nginx, Mysql, and PHP. And this is the technology stack we're going to be using. It's the most popular technology stack in the Laravel community. Most of the Laravel community is using Nginx because that's what Forge is. Laravel Forge uses Nginx, so I think that's why most people are focusing on Nginx. And so that's what we're going to be doing just because it's the most popular. If you go around to forums or blog posts, you're probably going to find information about Nginx. And so I thought that would be a better one to teach you instead of Apache. Also, Nginx is a little bit faster when it comes to, with fewer resources. So on these smaller servers, Nginx tends to be a little bit faster. So Nginx is definitely, Apache's an older server. It's been around for much longer, but Nginx is very quick, and it seems to be kind of the popular modern one that people are switching to. So this is the LEMP stack, is Linux, Nginx, MySQL, and PHP. We already have Linux. We installed this at the end of the last video, and it basically just came when we installed the when we set up our server on Vultr. We set up the server, we went through the wizard to choose how we wanted it, and it installed Ubuntu 16. Okay, that's what we told it to install. So we're going to be following along with a Ubuntu server. If you're on a DigitalOcean droplet, as long as you have Ubuntu, you can follow along directly exactly the same, even though I've got a Vultr server. Now, if you don't have a host yet, if you are interested in trying something out and following along, I highly recommend Vultr. It's VULTR. And I actually have a credit down below. So before you sign up, if you want to go down there, you click the link, and then it will ask you for an email, your name, and your password. No credit card. That's it. 3 questions. And it'll set up an account and give you $20 for free. So you have a $20 credit if you follow the link down below. Otherwise, I don't know if they give you any credit. I don't think so. They might give you $5, I think. So you'll get 20 if you sign up down below with the link that I've got down there. So that's a deal for the fellow dev marketers I was able to get for us. Okay. If you do want to stick with DigitalOcean, I've got $10 for DigitalOcean down there as well. You can click there, create an account, and do DigitalOcean. It really doesn't matter what you do because once you're set up and you're SSH'd into this server, it's going to be exactly the same steps. Okay. So let's go ahead and do this. So let's make sure we've got this here. Let's copy this URL. Or sorry, this isn't a URL. This is the IP address. Let's copy the IP address. And of course, if you have a domain set up for this, you come over to DNS, you can set up a domain, and then you would use the domain to log in instead of the IP address. But we're going to be using the IP because that's what we got. Let's go back over to our terminal. And here on my terminal, I've got, okay, we're logged into my computer here. We're at the base. And we're just going to go ahead and log into the computer. So we're going to do SSH. And then we're going to type the user we want to log in as. In this case, it's root because that's the only server we have. And our user that we have. And then our IP address and click enter. And this is going to boot us into Ubuntu. So we'll be good to go. All right. So now we can go ahead and start doing stuff with our server with the command line that we've got right here. So we could do anything at this point. We can install applications. We can, transfer files over. You have full control on what you want to do here. Currently, this is a clean install of Ubuntu. That's it. It's a clean install. So what we're going to do from here, once you're logged in for the first time and you got everything set up, is we're going to go ahead and before we start installing our web servers and our MySQL and PHP, before we install that, we need to make sure that our package manager is up to date. Okay, and this is called apt-get. Okay, and apt-get is the package manager that Ubuntu uses, and think of it like the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store, okay? It's like an app store, and there's all these applications that you can install, and it manages updates for us, and it manages all these things automatically, and that's basically what apt-get is it's like the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store, okay? It's gonna manage all that stuff for us and make it super easy to install new programs, okay? So think about it like an app store. Before we continue also, I want to mention that I highly recommend, for those that are just jumping in, that you open up this guide. So down in the description, at the very top of the description, the first link is going to be the link to this guide, and this is the guide that I wrote. And this is the most detailed guide on the internet for how to deploy a Laravel application, and we're going to be following this guide to a T, okay? So you can just scroll down, and everything's in the same order on the guide that we're going to go through in this video. Now, part 1 of this series covered everything up through step 3. Okay, so we covered all this stuff. We covered step 2 here as well, and now we're on step number 3. And again, all we did was basically we created our server droplet, our server. Okay, so now we're on step number 3. And like I mentioned earlier, we want to go ahead and install or update our apt-get manager. So let's come back to our application here, and we're going to update the apt-get. So do sudo apt-get update. And while this updates, let me just explain real quick for those new to Linux. Sudo stands for super user do. Okay, what you're basically saying is, hey, do this as if I am the admin, or as the admin, I guess, with my admin privileges. If you're not an admin, you wouldn't be able to use it. So we're going to be you're going to see sudo a lot, and that's all sudo means is you're saying this is really the normal command is apt-get update. We're going to be doing a lot of commands where we put sudo on the front of them, and that's because we need to do these as the super user, and the super user is like the system admin, okay? That's like the highest level of user that Linux has. So you're going to see super user or sudo a lot, which stands for super user do, and then the command that we want to do. All right, and if you ever have problems, make sure you are using sudo, because a lot of these commands, when you're installing these types of system level applications, you have to have super user privileges to make it work. Of course, we're logged in as root, so root has super user privileges. All right, now we went ahead, this just updated the installer for apt-get, the apt-get system. And now what we want to do is we want to install Nginx. So again, there's 2 main servers out there, Apache and Nginx. Apache is obviously the big boy in the room. That's the one you hear about a lot. But Nginx is growing in popularity, and Nginx is more common from what I've noticed in the Laravel community. So that's what we're going to be installing today. So let's go ahead and install Nginx. We just do that with using the apt-get. This is the app store basically. So we're going to do sudo apt-get, and then we're going to tell it to install Nginx. This is how you spell Nginx. So it's pronounced like engine, like a train engine, but it's spelled with a letter N and then Ginx. Okay, so you're gonna go and click enter, and this is gonna go ahead and start installing Nginx. Now, whenever you're using apt-get, it's always gonna tell you how big the file is, and you have to make sure you want to use that. So we're gonna go ahead and click yes. It says here it's 9,000 kilobytes, so it's 9 megabytes. Let's go ahead and click yes, and it's gonna start installing the application. All right, so I went ahead and just fast forwarded real quick, but it doesn't take very long to install. So you should be good to go there. It went ahead and installed everything. And again, now we're on step 4 of our guide. So we installed Nginx. Now, we've got Nginx at this point. So the one thing I wanted to show you guys is once you get done here and you see root localhost, you know that you're done. The one thing I wanted to show you is that in the last video, remember we went to our IP address? And when we went to our IP address, we got that like system error, and I said it doesn't know how to handle a server request. Well, now if we type in our IP address, you can see it says welcome to Nginx. It says that our web server is successfully installed and working. There's still further configuration required though. So this shows you now that we have Nginx, and now if we visit our domain or our IP address, whatever we're using, when we visit that page, it's actually working. It's retrieving a page and it's sending that back to the user. So we're getting a web page, and this is an actual web page. Okay, so we're already off to the races. We're on to a good start. And now what we need to do is we need to install MySQL. So we have the L, which is Linux, the E, which is Nginx. Now let's install the M, which is MySQL. Okay, so we're going to head back over to our terminal here, and we're going to install MySQL the same way we installed the other applications. We're going to do sudo apt-get install, and then we're going to say MySQL-server. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and click enter, and that's going to install everything we need for the MySQL server. You can see it's a little bigger, it's 160 megabytes. So let's go ahead and click yes, that's okay, and then it will go ahead and actually install it. Now, once you get, it gets partway through the install, you're going to get a window like this. So this window is basically asking you to set a password for the root MySQL user, all right? So this is for when you're actually logging into MySQL, you know, you have a user and a password for different things, and then you have the root user as kind of the base user for MySQL. Well, by default, it actually doesn't install a password, okay? So you could actually just click OK, and it won't have a password, so it's just a root user without a password. That's probably what you have on your computer. That's what I have on my local computer. But when you're on the internet, you need to have a password, okay? You can't go around with a root user and no password. That's super sketcy. You're gonna have major security issues. So what you need to do is create a good, safe password. So I'm gonna go ahead and create a password real quick here. I'm just going to be dev marketer just for this tutorial. I would do an even more secure password normally. So you're going to want a good secure password. So think of a good secure password that you can remember, because you're going to need this password again later, and write this in. And again, this is the password for MySQL. It doesn't need to be the same as just the one for MySQL. All right. After you're done, go ahead and click OK, and then repeat the password like that. And then once you get it, if you get it correct, it'll just go back to the terminal window. If they don't match, then it'll tell you. You'll get that pink window again, and it will remind you that you didn't do it right. Okay, so once you click that, remember that password, because that's going to be the password on for MySQL. All right, this went ahead and finished installing. You can see we're back now to this. So we have finished. We at least have MySQL installed. Now there's a few things that we want to do before we finish MySQL, and that's that we need to secure our MySQL installation. Now there is a script here that's going to help us secure that. Okay, and if we just do sudo MySQL_secure installation and click enter, this is going to run a script that helps lock down MySQL to make it more secure. So by default, MySQL has a lot of little security problems. It's got anonymous users. It allows the root user to be accessed remotely, and just different things like that. And it's going to go through and make sure it cleans up a lot of those security flaws. Since this is on our server, we don't want any of those to happen. So let's go ahead and just click enter here, and you can see here it says securing your MySQL development. We do need to put the password in. This is the same password you just typed in. And of course, it's not going to show anything while you're typing in the password, no asterisks or stars, but it just trusts that it's working. All right, now the first thing it wants to do is install this plugin called Validate Password. What this does is make sure that you have very secure passwords for MySQL. So every time you install a password or you change a password for MySQL, it makes sure that they're very secure. Now, I personally don't worry about this. I don't think this is super needed for me. I'm the only user on this server, so I'm just going to make sure that it's every password for MySQL is secure myself. So I don't need the plugin, but if you want it, you can go ahead and install it. But I'm going to click no. All right, and then it says, do you want to change the existing password for root? And this is, again, the password that we just set up when the window was pink. It's saying, hey, do you want to make sure there's a more secure password? Now's your opportunity to change it. And hopefully you did a secure password the first time around, so you can just type no for this. But if you want to change it, that now is a good opportunity to do it. Now I'm going to type no for this. So the first two questions, you're going to type no and no. Now after this, we're going to type yes for everything else, okay? Because these are all ones we want to make sure we do. So for example here, it says, by default, MySQL has an anonymous user. Should we remove the anonymous user? You're going to want to say yes. Okay, so now it deletes the anonymous user. Normally, root is allowed to access, let's see, it says normally root should only be allowed to access localhost, but by default, it's actually can be accessed remotely. So should we disallow the login remotely? We should say yes. We want to disallow that. Okay, so then it went through and set that up. Also, by default, MySQL has a database named test that anyone can access. This is only for testing, but should be removed before moving into production. So do you want to remove this database? We're going to click yes. Perfect. And now it went ahead and finished that. The last question says, do you want to reload the privilege tables? This is just a good idea. Just go ahead and do that. Just type yes for this and click enter. Now we're all done and our MySQL is secure. All right, so now we got all that set up. Let's go through and set up the last part. We have LEM now, which is MySQL, and now let's set up the P, which is for PHP. Now by default, there is actually PHP on with Linux, comes with PHP, so we could do PHP commands in here. However, we need PHP FPM, which stands for, that's like the fast CGI processing. So it's a way for PHP to basically process in the way that we need it to. Okay, so we're going to need to install that. There's also a couple other PHP scripts we need to install. We need to install PHP MySQL, which is the ability to for PHP to work with our MySQL that we just installed. And then there's one other requirement called PHP MB string, and this is a requirement for Laravel. And it's a plugin for PHP that's required by Laravel, and it doesn't come with Linux, so we're going to need to install that as well. So to install all these, we can actually do it in one line. We're just going to do sudo apt get install, and then we're going to list all the ones that we want to install. So we're going to install, first of all, PHP FPM, then PHP MySQL, and then do a space between all these, and then PHP MB string. Perfect. And go ahead and click enter, and it's going to tell you that it's 16 megabytes. That's okay. Click yes. And now it's going to go through and install all these. These should be pretty quick. All right, so there we go. We have it all complete. So PHP is now set up on our computer. We have a full LEMP stack. We have Linux, Nginx, MySQL, and PHP. So we got all this installed. There is one last thing that we need to do. Basically, we're going to need to do some configuration of these settings. So let's go through and do that before we worry about installing like Git and things like that. Okay, so let's first of all start off by, we need to make one quick change to our php.ini file. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to do sudo, and then we're going to do nano, and this just opens up, nano is a text editor inside of terminals, so if you need to edit like a file or whatever, nano is good for that. There's also vim and Emacs, which are very popular. They have a little bit higher of a learning curve, so we're just going to use nano for this tutorial, but you're welcome to switch this out and use vim or Emacs if you prefer. Okay, so we're going to use sudo nano, and then we're going to open the file. It's under etc php 7.0. We're using PHP 7, by the way. And then fpm, /fpm /php.ini. Okay, let's go ahead and open this up. It opens it up in our text editor, right? The nano text editor. Let's make it a little bigger. And what we're going to do is, if you can scroll through these, and all these little semicolons are comments. Okay, so none of these lines are being read, visible, because they're all commented out. What we're going to be doing is we're looking for one line that's called cgi.fix_path_info. Okay, now it's not very exciting. You can obviously just use the arrows here to scroll down and try to find the file, or we're actually going to search for it. So that you can see here it says where is, you do Control W and it launches where is. That's basically the search function. So let's do Control W. You can see here it says search for what, and we're going to type cgi.fix_path_info equals, and then we're going to click enter, and it's going to find the file. So here's the file that we're looking for. It highlighted it for us, and what we're going to do is just uncomment this out. So let's just get rid of the semicolon there, and then also at the end where it says equal to 1, let's set it equal to 0. Oops. Don't use, by the way, don't use the number pad. You need to use the numbers on the top of the keyboard, not the one on the side. I always do this. And in nano, that actually launches commands. Okay, so CGI fix_pathinfo equals 0, and make sure there's no semicolon at the beginning up here. Okay, that's all we need to do to change that. So let's go ahead and save this file. Now to save this file, you can just do exit, so Control X. And then after you do Control X, it'll say down here, do you want to save the file? We're going to say yes. So do a capital Y. And then it says, what do you want to name the file? Don't change anything, just click enter, and it will save it over as the same name. So that's it. So we've edited that PHP file. That's the only thing we really need to do right now. Now the next thing that we need to do is configure, well, before we configure that, let's actually restart, let's restart PHP. So we're going to do sudo system control, and then we're going to say restart PHP 7.0-FPM. Okay, it's gonna restart that for us. Okay, so now that that's set up, now we can go through and we need to configure Nginx. So let's do that now. So we're gonna do the same thing we did before. We're gonna open up in nano, so sudo nano, and then we're going to open up the configuration file for Nginx. So this is stored in /etc/nginx/sites-available and available, yep, and then /default. All right, so you want to open this up. And again, remember that you can head on over to our guide, and all of these are in the guide, right? So we're now on step, we're right here. So we're on step number 7 now. So these are the commands that you want to do. And of course, you can see these other commands up here for configuring PHP. So we're on step number 7 now. We're going to go ahead and open up this and take a look at the configuration file. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at that. So here's the configuration file that we have. Of course, in the guide, I get rid of all the comments, so it's a little easier to read. But you can see here that we're listening for the default server. And then down here, we've got our root. This is where Nginx looks for the files to serve, is in this var/www/html. And then down here, we've got our the different types of files that it should try to serve, okay? So by default, what happens is when someone visits the root of our application, this is considered the root. So Nginx goes to var www html and then looks for a default file. And it starts with default files. It looks for an index file. If it can't find that, it looks for an index.html file to serve. If it can't find that, it looks for html.htm. And if it can't find that, then it does this one. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell it, because we're serving index.php files. So we're going to tell it here to also look for index.php. And it's good to put it up here at the beginning. So put it up here at the beginning, index.php. I just do it right behind index, but index.php like that. So that's all we need to do. We can also delete this other one. We don't need this one anymore. Perfect. So now that we got that set up, it'll actually start accepting index.php files, okay? Otherwise, it would skip over them it wouldn't think they're valid. Now that we got that done, let's go through and also edit the server name. So you can see down just below that where it says server name, there's an underscore. And what we want to do here is put in our IP address that you can see up here. So let's put that in, or your domain. If you're using a domain, oh shoot, I did the... you have to use I always do the number pad. So if you're doing a domain, you would type your domain in. So like you would put in your domain, or in the case, because we're using an IP address, we're going to put in the IP address. So 45.32.194.214. Okay? And that's basically all we need for that. So let's go through and there's actually just one last thing we need to do, and we need to clean up our location files. So we got our first location file. We're going to come back to this file real quick right now. It basically tells it which files to try to access. Down here, we're going to be accessing this. So this is actually what we need to fix. It says pass the PHP scripts to fastcgi server, and that's what we need to do. Fastcgi is that's PHP FPM. All right. So what we're going to do here is we're going to actually comment out a few of these. So let's just real quick, let me just load down so we can see the whole thing. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is, since we're using PHP 7 FPM, we want to uncomment this line. And then we also want to uncomment these two lines up here. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's get rid of location. Let's get rid of this one. And then we just need this one as well. Okay? And then because we open this up, we need to uncomment this as well, so we can close our file. And again, if you're on the guide now, this is what we're working on right now. Okay, so we're now working on this red text, and of course I clean out all the comments, but this is basically what it is. We're using PHP 7.0 fpm.sock, and then make sure you have your include snippets, and then that's it. And then we need to do this one. So back over here, you can see we have location, we have our include snippets, we've got our fastcgi right here, and then we close it. And of course, you want to delete these, you're welcome to. So now let's also get rid of this location. And this location basically gets rid of, or this block right here tells it to ignore htaccess files. Htaccess files are something with Apache, and we don't need them here. Okay, so we're gonna ignore all htaccess files. So that's what we're doing here. So just get rid of these 3 comments on these 3 lines so that it will deny any .ht file or htaccess or things like that. Okay, just make sure you got all this. It looks good. So now we can go ahead and save this file. Let's go ahead and save it. Type yes and then enter, and that should save the file. And then once we got the file set up, what we can do is let's just make sure there's no errors in that file, just because it's easy to mess it up. So what we're going to do is we're going to type sudo nginx-t, and this is going to test our configuration file. So you should get this command. It'll say the configuration file is okay. Configuration test was successful, then that's good. If you get a syntax error, then you want to go back and make sure you did everything correctly. And again, go back to our guide and look at the text in here to make sure you did it correctly. Okay, so you want it to look just like this. All right, so now moving on, what we want to do is we just need to reload Nginx. So let's go through and do that. So we're going to do system. Well, we need to do sudo system control, and we're going to do reload Nginx like that. So go ahead and click enter, and then that will reload Nginx. All right, so now the next thing that we need to do is, the next thing we need to do, because this is part of our configuration, so let's do this in this video. We need to create a folder for Laravel. Okay, so as of right now, we're actually, if you remember back when we were looking at it, the root of Nginx is it looks inside of var www/html. That's where it's looking for the files, and we want to create a folder for our Laravel application, and we're going to point Nginx to that folder. So let's make a new folder called Laravel, and we're going to store our Laravel project inside of this folder. So let's come back over to our terminal, and now inside of our terminal, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're going to do sudo make directory. This makes a folder. Do -p, and then we're going to do /var/ the location of the folder, www/Laravel. Okay, and this is going to set up that folder in our www folder called Laravel. So go ahead and click enter. You're going to make it. So that means we're good to go basically there. So now when we put our Laravel application, it'll go inside of this folder. That's the goal. Okay. So now that we got that out of the way, let's go and let's tell Nginx about this file. So we're going to do sudo nano, just opens up the same file we did before, /etc/nginx /sites available /default. All right. And then this again opens up the file we were just working on. But now let's scroll on down and let's tell it about this root location. So instead of looking inside of HTML, let's do it inside of Laravel. And of course, I just kind of want to show you guys this. A popular option would be you could obviously just delete everything inside of HTML, and then you could put your Laravel application inside of HTML. That works too. But I'm going to do it. I like to do it this way. So let's do it this way. So now we have a folder called Laravel, and that's our Laravel application. And let's see. Oh, and actually, this is a little bit inaccurate because the file that we actually want to serve is inside the public folder. Okay, so if you go look at our Laravel application real quick, let's actually open it up. Okay, so I'm opening up our blog application here. Let's go ahead and open it up. And this would basically be our Laravel folder. Now inside of here, at the root of our folder, we've got this public folder, and then we've got this file called index.php. And it's important to understand what this file does. This is the file that we want to load every single time, regardless of what the URL is, okay? And this file here is basically what brings Laravel on board to an HTTP request, okay? So let's say you're trying to visit a web page, you try to visit the page or whatever, and it's a Laravel application. Well, we want Nginx to deliver the index.php. This page, loads up the auto load files, and then it accesses the app inside of our Bootstrap, which then pulls in our routes. Our routes then will parse the current URL, and then to figure out where it should send, what controller it should go to. Then it's going to go over to the controller. The controller might use the model, whatever, going to process the controller. The controller will most likely return a view, and then that's what will get sent back to the user. So in order to basically trigger Laravel, we need to access this index.php inside of our public folder, okay? So this is where no matter what, we want to tell Nginx, no matter what, basically, no matter what the URL is, go into public folder, go into index.php, and make that the one that you serve up, okay? We want you to show that one, because when you trigger this one, it's going to trigger a chain of events that's going to cause Laravel to do its thing. It's going to determine what URL to go to, what parameters to pass in. It's going to process our controllers, return models and views and stuff like that. Okay, so basically whenever you access this index.php, it triggers Laravel. So what we want to do now, back over in our terminal, is we want to tell it that the root of the application is actually inside of public, because when it goes into public, it's going to find this index.php file and then trigger that file, okay? And that's going to set Laravel off to do its thing. So that's what we're trying to do here. You kind of have to understand a little bit about how Laravel works, and that's basically how it works. So you should never change index.php, but you're going to want to point to it inside of your server so that it can serve up the right files, okay? So with that out of the way now, let's see. You basically should be good to go from here. So now what we need to do is we just need to change the query string down here. So I kind of mentioned earlier that we might come back to this location file, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Let's just go ahead. We can get rid of the 404, and we're going to have it run this command. So index.php and then query string. So we're going to do query string like this. All right. And basically what this does is whenever you try to go to, let's say you go to your domain /Alex, right? Well, it's going to first of all look for a file called alex.php, HTML, all that. If it can't find that, then it's going to look for a folder called Alex. And if it finds that folder, then it will go back and look for, the HTML, .php, all that stuff. So it'll go through that process. And if it doesn't find that, then it will go through and it'll just send it to our index.php with all the query parameters on there as well. Okay, that's basically what we're telling it to do here. Now, the reason why do we have these in front? Well, that's because let's say you have a program like PHPMyAdmin. Well, PHPMyAdmin is not part of Laravel, but you might have that folder on your server with all your stuff for PHPMyAdmin. So basically then if you went to your domain /PHPMyAdmin, it would be picked up by this right here. So it would try this, it wouldn't find it. Then it would find a folder called PHPMyAdmin, and then it would be able to trigger that before it gets caught into Laravel. But basically if none of those happen, then it will do exactly like you would expect, and it would trigger Laravel because it'll use our index.php. All right. So hopefully that makes sense. That's everything we need to do to get set up here. So let's go ahead and save this file. We're going to do Control X, do a Y to save, and then click Enter. And now we're all good here. So we're done with all of this. And now the last thing we want to do is just restart our server. So let's do sudo service nginx restart. And of course, you can use system control or you can use service. I actually tend to prefer service. But you can also use system control to do a restart as well. All right, now that we've restarted our server, the new files should have taken effect. So you'll see here now we get a 404, and this shouldn't be surprising. This should actually be a good sign. Notice that we're not getting that welcome to Nginx anymore. We're getting a 404. Why do you think that is? Well, if you think about it, it's pointing now to Laravel /public /index.php, which doesn't exist. And you and I know that because we haven't moved our files up there. If we go back to our terminal here, let's do a cd into var www Laravel to take a look at our Laravel folder. Now we're inside of there. Let's type ls to take a look at all the files. You click enter, and it doesn't do anything because there are no files, okay? There's no files to show. This is a completely empty folder because we haven't moved our Laravel project into this folder yet, okay? So hopefully that makes sense. That's why we're getting a 404 error, is because there's no files in here. So it's trying to look inside of our public folder for an index.php, and it's not finding one, and so it's returning a 404, okay? So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, now the last thing that we want to do, and I'm going to kind of fit this into this video, and this is the this is our swap file. So to set up our swap file, what we want to do here is we want to, the swap file basically is if you're on a smaller server that has, say, less than about a gig of memory of RAM, you may want to do this because when we download applications, it downloads it into the RAM. So we sometimes need to make an overflow file, which is basically a swap file. So let's go through and make a swap file if you're on less than 1 gigabyte of RAM. If you're not, you could skip over this. And this is just going to make sure that when we start pulling in Composer and Git and things like that, that we have enough memory to handle it, okay? So in order to create a swap file, we're just going to do sudo fallocate and then -l 1 gigabyte, and then we're going to call it swap file, like that, okay? And then after we create the swap file, we're just going to make it into, we're actually telling it that it's a swap file. So we do sudo make swap, and then tell it to do that to the swap file. And then it says here that it set it up as a file. So we made a 1 gigabyte file, and then now it's saying it's configured as as a swap file. So we configured it correctly. And now the last thing we need to do is tell it to actually start using it. So we'll do sudo swap on and tell it swap file. There we go. Click enter. Insecure permissions, that's okay though. It's basically saying it's got more permissions than it should have. Okay, so we're good to go here. And now basically we have everything we need. We've got our whole LEMP stack. We've got Linux, Nginx, MySQL, PHP. We've got MySQL, and we got MySQL configured. We have PHP configured, and we have Nginx configured. So we basically are ready to go. You could start serving applications if you wanted. If we were doing something really basic like CodeIgniter or like a static HTML page, you could just toss it up now into that folder and it would start working, right? But we're obviously doing Laravel. So the next video is going to talk about how we can move our Laravel project from our local computer up into our server, okay? And we're gonna do that using Git, all right? So that's what we're gonna be doing in the next video. We're gonna install Git on our server, and then we're gonna use Git to transfer files from our local computer to our server. So it's gonna be a very valuable lesson. We're gonna learn about Git hooks and a few other things. So be sure to stay tuned for that. After that, the fourth and final video we should have all the files up after the next episode. So then the fourth and final video, we're actually going to then set up and configure Laravel. So I'll see you guys in the next video.